Since my early days of playing chess, I've always been someone who's been keen on thinking. Now, this was contrasted with an affinity to what I'd say a connection to the universe or being in tune with the universe. And well, that's just what it felt like. Now, this is all to draw a somewhat, somewhat of an analogy to draw a clear distinction between the somewhat modes in which we live our lives, being how one time we are planning and doing everything that we can to achieve a goal or a dream that we want, and then on the other side we're just being free, letting life be, passing by the wind, just moving wherever the wind takes us. Now that's somewhat in this broadcast, that's kind of what I'll be tackling today, and how that somewhat has played, and how I suppose this year has somewhat played into me taking an oath into living my life, I suppose. If you're new here, welcome to the Subject Radio, and let's jump right into it. Now, let's discuss. Okay, so we have planning on one side, and we have living, I suppose, living life on the other side. Now, the plan whenever I was in a state of planning, or it's planning, but also control. So planning how things should go and all of that, and it's not like it wasn't the rigid sort of planning where if things didn't go my way, then I'd be angry or whatever. Not wasn't that. It's more you're planning and then things you get a setback and then you adapt and then you move on and plan. But it was always within the structure of planning. So that was planning. Whenever that happened because whenever that happened because I wanted something basically. So I had it was either from an ambition, a desire to achieve a goal or whatever. It was because I wanted something and I wanted to move towards. And generally how that, so whenever I want something, when I move out, that's the flow that's the mindset that I was in. And then that would end up slowly creeping into other parts of the way I live my life, in the sense of slowly wanting control over the other things. So whenever I'd want to, so when I'm planning about how I want my life to go and all of that and the structure, that's con- that's ideally controlling what I can control, ideally. And then slowly that move on to controlling, to wanting to control things that I can't control, or the outcomes of things that I can't control. And then slowly then I'd get to the realization that I can't control things outside of my control. And then they're really outside of my control. And whether I like it or not, they will happen the way they do. That's just what it means to have things outside of my control. And then in that, just say, okay, I give up. Now, this is just how things will be. And then you just, I think this also has happened with my personality, where I had to accept the way the personality is, or the way the situation is, and all of that, personality wise. So just accept the way things are, and then just move with the way, and move with what I suppose this internal feeling is leading me, and all of that. And that's then how I'd move on to living life the way things are, and just going with the wind. But recently though, recently though, I did think that I should probably move to a system where I somewhat integrate the two, as in integrate the planning and the living life, in a sense. By integrating, what I mean here is sort of like, so generally with two opposing mindsets that, okay, from the way I see it, the way I do it is that generally when I have two opposing mindsets or characteristics that clash each other, generally they don't meet each other, or there's no there's no I don't put myself in situations where those two have to meet or clash, since both of them are separate and they each have their own somewhat strengths and situations in which they are helpful in. So generally you don't meet, but then I've been thinking that these two should integrate, in the sense of that you somewhat put them together, and then there's there is a wall, right? Now you just remove that wall and let them clash, basically have a conflict and fight it out. Now, somewhat of a somewhat similar to letting a chemical reaction happen, where you have two substances which then react, and sometimes it can get violent, sometimes it's maybe smooth, but there is some, I suppose, violence in there. Violence in the sense of you don't know which way it's gonna go. It's just a clash that's happening, and they're just somewhat fighting it out. And then at the end of that, what you get then is a final product, which is not okay in this case, which is not say the thinking, which is not the free having the freedom, just letting things be, but it's a combination of the two, which is it has similarities to being free, it has similarities to planning, but it's not quite. It has its own way of doing, of being. That's what I'd say. That's what I'd call integration. So I've been thinking of integrating the planning and the thinking. But like I said, that these two, planning and integration, are, I mean, this planning and living life as is, there's somewhat two different ways of living life that they're somewhat what you'd call opposites. Whereas the situations you'd find yourself thinking in are completely different from the situations you'd find that being free works, as in that when you're thinking, right, when you plan out, you wanna plan out every single thing about whatever thing this is, especially if we say in technical domains that you have, say your, well, I'm doing engineering, so your engineering, your maths, science, your STEM, in your STEM field, you want to plan out everything that's in that field and making sure that it's clean and cleared and all of that. So that's in the freedom phase. But then in your, that's in the planning phase, sorry. Now, in your freedom phase, then that's where you're just being free and letting things go and just seeing where the wind takes you. That doesn't really fit with planning and figuring out how you want things to go and move. So, how did I get to the point where I was thinking of integrating the two? And well, for that, I'd have to, well, tell you about how my 2024 has gone. And well, in one phrase, I'd say it is continually pushing through, regardless of whether I've reached my limit or not. And well, as a side note, I probably reached my limit about a month or two ago, but I've still pushed through. So, to find out the main contributors of that, I suppose you'd have to stick around till the end of the video. So now, in December 2023, towards the late end, from the 15th onwards, so from that point, I decided to somewhat take a break from podcasting and content in general, but podcasting was the main thing that I was doing back then. So I decided to take a break from podcasting to somewhat fill up my content glass, as in to see and yeah, fill up my content glass. So maybe when I was speaking to people or my cousins and so on, then you're just building slowly, getting ideas here and there, thinking about new things, watching, just a somewhat relaxed state where I'm just whatever, letting whatever happens happen. So this was this was firstly because I wanted to somewhat relax from 2023, which wasn't as hectic as this one, but it had its own ups and downs, which, well, yeah. So it was firstly that, but I also wanted that when I got into 2024, that I'd hit the ground running and I'd set up my things and all of that, which, well, the plan worked somewhat. That's what happened in 2024. I was able to hit the ground running. I'd built up so many things during the December that I was off, built up somewhat the desire and the drive, and built that drive up, that once 2024 came, I was ready for it. And pretty early in 2024, I got started in the thing that I wanted to do. I was filming. I did I was filming, I was moving, and I also somewhat got ahead with schoolwork a bit, the project that I was doing a bit, and all of that. So things were moving well. And if I'm to reflect on that, then was it a good thing? Yes, but that somewhat that somewhat is the start of my downfall and how this year has gone. But anyway, things were moving, and I was working on my project on the project that I wanted to do, and I was moving. And well, first semester started, things were moving. Like I said, things were moving. But as a student, employment is something that floats into your mind here and there regularly, and just thinking about what you do, what you can do. To someone, for me, it's not really about. Okay, I suppose it is employment, but it's more how you're gonna sustain yourself after this well degree or spell that you're in varsity for. So to combat that, I wanted to do side projects on the side that where I'd be helping people with their own side projects, somewhat volunteering, where I'd be gaining experience, gaining projects here and there that I'd be working on. And somewhat what I actually ended up doing was getting projects from people, and then I got them in, and then I was helping here and there, slowly building up my projects, the project catalog that I had. And this wasn't really a problem. I kept on moving, I kept on building, and I think one thing that was different about this year, because compared to last year I really didn't know much of what I was doing. Last year was more of I was finally free. So I was finally free to be able to start and do what I wanted to do. Being that okay, so last year I was 18, so firstly you're somewhat an adult. So that's the first thing. And then I was somewhat free. And okay, so coming with that is then I'm then able to set up things in my own name. So a business and whatnot, I'm able to set that up in my own name. So now I'm responsible for that which I wanted to have. So there's that I wanted to have, and then by doing that, then I got caught up in so many different things. Caught up in the sense of that I had to learn what these new things. So I had to learn social media marketing. I had to learn okay YouTube. I had to learn how to write a newsletter in the early start of the year, and then towards the later end, then I had to learn podcasting, but not really podcasting, but YouTube in general. I had to learn what YouTube was, and then so podcasting kind of had a easy flow to it, but that was another thing that I learned: what equipment you get and all of that. That was all things I had to learn. But I suppose the major thing was learning my own energy system. That's what I had. That was the main thing that, because in school, basically, from primary to high school, you just have you're set on, you don't have, the time that you have to work is set. So you know that you're going to school from say 8 to maybe 2 3. So that's setting your time. So that's whatever you're doing after that time, you know that the next day, if it's say a weekday, that you're going to school, and then that's set. That so that is something that you don't have to think about. Whereas in varsity, when you don't have that, well, firstly you can attend or not attend the lectures that you want to attend, the lectures that you want to. So there's firstly that basically what I'm getting to is that your own schedule is set. You're the one who sets your schedule, which I wanted to do, but the the flip side of that was that I didn't know my own energy system. So how far could I push myself? How far do I need to? Because when it comes to me as a highly driven individual, well, that's how I'd see myself, highly ambitious and whatnot. There are these projects where, for when I was doing YouTube, I wanted to promote and just I wanted to get there as quickly as possible. To get there as quickly as possible means that then I'd be pushing and pushing and pushing. That sometimes towards the end of the year, I'd be sleeping when the sun was up. So that's the energy drive in the system. Now, if you're sleeping at when the sun is up, I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, but the flip side, by doing that, you should know that as well. That okay, another thing that happened to me was that I'd crash. So I'd have a 2 week spell of working, just like focused on working without any rest or anything, minimal rest, and then have a crash for 2 weeks where I'd have to then recalibrate, build up that energy again. So things like that, where if you're gonna have a spell where you're gonna sleep when the sun is up, then you're gonna need to then balance that drive that you have with something with the rest, basically, to balance it out. So things like that, I didn't know that energy system existed. I just thought I could then push and push, but then there was the crashing and the energy levels and all of that. So that energy management, last year I didn't have it, but this year I had it. So even though I was building in these mini projects even though I was building the project catalog that I had, I also somewhat built up a it was a minor somewhat uh pri- priority scale, but rather a more focus on the types of project that I wanted to have. So it wasn't just any random project. It was projects. It was more. I already knew that I had a lot of projects and that it was better to cut down on the projects that I had. So there was somewhat a that was also in the back of my mind where you had to clean up the project that I had to make sure that I didn't have that many projects. So there was a lot more somewhat wisdom, if I can say, on how I was using the time and the projects and the attention that I had. So that was what I was carrying into the new year, and as well as now knowing how my energy system was working, because I didn't start with YouTube in September. That wasn't the first creator thing I started. I started in February with the newsletter towards the end of February. So I had the newsletter, I had then the social media with the newsletter, and then I had the podcasting, and then I had the podcasting because I never really released videos. So I had the YouTube, and then there was Power Project run down on the side as well. So I'd been building, I'd blending what my energy management system was, and then balancing that with how varsity is as well. So by second year, first semester, things were things were moving in the right direction, and I had started my January early in the grind properly, all of that. So things was I had a grip on my things, and then by the time recess came, I then reevaluated my priorities and what did I want for my life and all of that. So that's then where I then revamped my channel, my podcast. Yeah, the channel and the podcast, because that's what I actually did. So I revamped that. Recess came. That was during recess. So I think about 2 weeks where I just cleaned myself. So I cleaned myself, and then I cleaned the project that I was doing, what I wanted to do, and then figured out my systems and all of that. So it was cleaned. Second semester was going to work well. Was someone going to move with first semester? So, which wasn't really technical. So okay, so first semester, first semester you think things are gonna go well, and then second semester you just lose the ball completely. The workload in varsity first semester is it's not it's tense, but you can get a grip of it, and then second semester you just automatically blows up in your face no matter what you're planning. That just seems to what happened. That happened last year. Okay, last year was my first year, and this year it was coming. But comparison, I thought that was just first year, but comparison wise, second semester it just drops the ball on you, and then everything just blows up. But anyway, coming into second semester, I had things planned. I had my energy management system good. I had some other revamped my things and all of that, which was good. So coming into second semester, I thought I was good. I thought things were going well. That was until I decided to watch the Olympics. So once I started watching the Olympics, things started heading south. That's where everything went wrong, in a sense. So we came back. We came back to second semester. I got in second semester. There was about a week or two that before the there was about a week or two started in, and then the Olympics started, and then that for pretty much the 2 weeks. That's what I watched from. I mean, I watched a few things out there. Volleyball was the number one thing that drew my interest. Basketball was another. Those two finals were they were tense, man, but they were also interesting and all of that. Basketball, I mean, there's handball. I watched the new sports that I didn't know that I wouldn't think I'd watch before, but well, volleyball were on my list, and well, basketball as well. But that's not the point. So I watched those. I watched the Olympics for 2 weeks, and then in that 2 weeks I had an assignment, and then coming out of that 2 weeks there was an assignment, and then there was a so coming out of the 2 weeks there was an assignment, and then there was another assignment from a different project, and then there was now practical reports, and then slowly that spiraled into more assignments, more practical reports, and then there was, well, another somewhat practical I didn't want to work, that I spent a very long time working, when turns out it was probably the board that I was giving and not necessarily the code that I had, but there were just a lot of problems and problems and problems, and I was also clearing up to go on a somewhat vacation. I call it a vacation. It technically wasn't a vacation, but I call it a vacation. So I was clearing up my work and moving ahead and all of that to clear up for this vacation that I had, that I wanted to go on. And slowly I was cutting out projects and so on. So there was this vacation that I wanted to go on, right? So to do that, then I somewhat ran myself into the ground for somewhat the first time. Okay. For somewhat the first time. I never feeling the lighting change, but perhaps it's just me. But okay, so that's not the first time I ran myself into the ground for the first time, but I was able to get what I wanted to get out, and I was able to go on this somewhat vacation that I wanted to go on. And well, I suppose before I continue on how the vacation went, well, to bring it back to somewhat the planning and the living in this stage, at this stage, I suppose, what I had then, I somewhat had a slight integration of the two, between the thinking and the living freely, where the only the main thing that I'd be doing was living freely in the way that I wanted to live, and then the thinking would be coming into the management system. How do I manage this? How do I manage that? Say, do I feel it? So there were, of course, there were times. Say, if I was feeling particularly energized, there were days where I'd push myself to go through. Okay, but this is besides the part where I was setting up for the vacation. When I was doing setting up for the vacation, I did whatever I could to go on the vacation. So that one, whatever I could do, I did. So that part is out. But on the general side, whenever I was feeling particularly energized or needed to do something, then I'd do it, but I'd still sleep before the sun came up. So that's one thing I'm doing right now. But whenever I feel particularly energized, then on that day, then I would push through. In in general, I was managing myself, so I did have a good link between the two of managing them. So that's what I had before, somewhat, I'd say, the vacation. Okay, so I had cleared up all that I had to clean up to make sure that I could go on the vacation without having to worry about school stress or anything like that, just so I could focus on this vacation that was happening. So I cleaned everything up and all of that, and I ran myself into the ground doing so. So I suppose another thing on that side was, I wanted to shatter my own personality, in the sense of, there was some fatal flaws. Even though I had a good management system between how I was thinking, how I was feeling, and all of that. I did want to shatter my personality at that time, because there were some fatal flaws that I'd found with it, in the way that I was dealing in some situations, and how perhaps sometimes I'd find myself maybe circling around the same topic and not going anywhere, things like that. So there were some fatal flaws that I had found, that I felt, I'm gonna need to shatter this personality that I have. And it's more, shattering my personality wasn't really, it was more shattering so that I could build up a new personality that didn't have these flaws and all of that. It's more so, shattering my personality hasn't been something new. It's more of something that I've done consistently, because I suppose, as a brief, you should check out my previous episodes. But shattering my personality is more of, suppose, pseudo personalities rather, is that it's more now, I was moving on to the next step in the personality progression system that I was moving in, and not really like the true core, but rather moving towards a personality that reflected my true core. Okay, I suppose I should release what is personality soon now, because I'm explaining this. So that should be a video that's coming out soon, but explaining this, I realized that I should release it soon. But okay, so basically, personality is a representation. That's what I said in a video. So click the link up there. So personality is a representation of who you are, but it's a representation, and how accurate that representation is based on some other factors and not really your true self. So personality is a representation of your true self, but it's not really your true self. So your personality is influenced by, say, your childhood, how you grew up, how you think, environment, etc. So that's your personality. So now, what I'm doing then was moving from a certain personality that I had to a new, better better personality that then represented who I was, my core personality, much better. So I'd been planning on doing that before this vacation. Okay, so now we went on this vacation, and then, well, it didn't really last very long. And then, so just as it was about to get interesting and exciting, now don't get me wrong, the time that I spent there, it was exciting in the sense that I'd finally found I'd finally found the feeling that I'd been longing for, in the sense of I finally found something that I'd wanted to do, like really, really wanted to do, where I'd say I'd say no to everything else, which I said in the focus video. But that was the thing that I'd figured out when I was on this vacation. This was like really something that I'd clear up everything else for to do, or it was up there in one of the things that these are the few things that I'd clear up everything for. So that was one of the times where I'd find something that really, really interested me, which I had a dry spell for a very, very long time, and then so that vacation was one of the times that I found something that I really, really wanted to do. And then with it, and then so in the time that I spent there, that was the time, mind you, I was still somewhat resting from running myself into the ground. So we spent a few days, and then the vacation had to end. The vacation ended early. So with it ending early, then I had to come back to the schoolwork and the varsity. And I think another thing to mention was that when it comes to how the environment that I had in varsity, it wasn't really, with the way things were structured before the vacation, it wasn't really an environment that I would that that say pushed me to the limit, or pushed me to the limit enjoyment wise, which is a weird thing to which is a weird thing to say, but for me, the concept of fun for me is in things that I find, I suppose, okay, so fun, the concept of fun, you find, for me, at times I find that concept of fun is in the things that I'd want to do, and then that challenge me, so that push me to my extreme. That's somewhat fun. So, but then when it came to somewhat campus life, it wasn't really. When it came to campus life, it had a bit of staleness to it, or some. It wasn't as, had a bit of rigidness to it. It wasn't really as fun. So moving from, so it was, so planning to go on the vacation was then making sure that I was able to then get away from somewhat the staleness that was in the campus life, and then the vacation ended early, and then I had to get back and then to that campus life again. So that disconnect then caused a lot of, was another thing that added to, I suppose, what would feel the loss of then not having to see out the vacation to the number of days that was supposed to go on, basically. So that is when it ended prematurely, I suppose. It was more of somewhat understanding. When that happened, it was somewhat, for me, it was somewhat understanding. I somewhat understood what loss was like, in the sense of, it's, I somewhat understood the difference between thinking about loss for some time and that. So for me, as a person, I'd been thinking somewhat about emotions, personality, and for a very long time, and all of that. But then there's a difference when you're thinking about it, and then it actually happens, and the feeling that actually happened. So now it was then realizing then the arrogance and the what was it? It was the arrogance and the ignorance of it. Where now back then I'd be thinking that if this happens, then I could do this and do that and do that. But then all logic goes out the window. Well, yeah, all logic basically goes out the window. Most of it goes out the window when a situation of loss happens to you, where it feels like you lose something or something was taken away from you, and so on. So that's coming back. So okay, so I came back then to summer campus life, all while I had felt I wasn't recovered from the I hadn't recovered from running myself to the ground school wise. And then the vacation ending somewhat actually shattered my personality really. Now I did say I was planning on shattering it, but then there's a difference between me shattering my own personality, as in me being the one initiating the shattering, as opposed to an external event being the one shattering the personality. So sure, I was a bit more open to it, but given that it was something else that is an external event that shattered it, where because with the way I was doing it was more. So I was cutting away from so okay so I was cutting away at the core of this personality while building a new one. So then towards the end where I'd be almost so it was time to shatter this one and then bring in the new one. There's sort of been I suppose like an integration where this one somewhat dies and then it dying then feeds this new personality that I had that I'd been building. Whereas in the way the shattering that actually happened with the vacation ending quickly, the way that what actually happened then was that there was no base to replace this. So everything, the whole personality shattered. It actually didn't even shatter. It just evaporated. It was nowhere to be found. So I had no. So my base was gone. My fire was gone. The desire, the drive, all of that was gone. And so all of that, didn't even it didn't even shatter because generally I'd shatter it and then rebuild it. That's not really what happened. What actually happened, it just evaporated and disappeared. So actually, so then for I suppose a few weeks to months, I was somewhat in that where I had no base. I was still pushing. I had no fire, and then so then in that I think then I lost how that freedom of living life because I was somewhat okay. So beforehand I was lost in the sense of what I wanted to do, but then in that but then after the vacation ended, then there wasn't really anything that I could think about besides this vacation. And the worst part was here and there there'd always be a reminder about the vacation. So that's it's it is what it is, I suppose. And yeah, it is what it is. But another thing I suppose was that even though I didn't really have much time to okay, so I had a week to somewhat process it, but then I was back into varsity workload again, and it I never really had time to process it until say now is the time where I can actually maybe sit for a day or two and actually somewhat relax. So that's actually now the only time where I can actually do that. Whereas beforehand it was trying to get myself over the line varsity wise. So never really having so the processing that happens because there is a processing that will happen. The processing that happens in that case was that I am processing I am processing it through doing through trying to get over the line, and then through that then builds character, which really isn't the point, but that's what happens where now you're just pushing through trying to get over the line, and then to do that I suppose then since there's no okay so since there's since there's no base from the core self, and then emotional is I suppose gone. If using the model that I did in, I forgot the video again. I'll put so using that model. So the core self is gone. The emotional self is gone. Now then, it was the logical self that then stepped in to do whatever it needed to do to get over the line, and then that's where now a lot of thinking came in, and just planning and different. But I suppose this type of thinking was different from how it was in high school. In high school, I was planning and sort of. This one was more. It had a lot more uh, visualization to it, or a lot more. Hmm, this is going to sound very confusing, but okay, how do I state this? Okay, so there's a concept of looking into the abyss. So, um, okay, so if you gaze into the okay, so I think so. Friedrich Nietzsche said this way: if you gaze into the abyss will gaze back at you. Um, something like that. I'll put it up here. So it was more that my logical side had gazed into the abyss of my freedom side when I still had it then, and then that then what I'm getting to by my somewhat mental side looking into or gazing into but mental side getting into the the freedom side. What I'm getting into that was that my my logical side then got somewhat tapped into got somewhat a freedom side added to it. So then it wasn't just purely logical. It was more logical with a sense of um, freedom to it, or living life to it, or just letting things be. So with the way that it worked now, instead of just personality and just thinking and planning and mentally, where there was just doing that, and how do I want my personality to be, the self improvement way, and all of that, and how that eventually led to my self improvement downfall. Instead of that, what was it was a lot more broad. There wasn't The funny part is there wasn't actually a lot of thinking. There wasn't a lot of thinking in the sense of that I need to do this and do that and do that and do that and that. But rather, it was more of a vague. It was more of a vague feeling, or like a vague. It was more of, so okay, so it was more of okay, so this is what I need to do, and then set up a world view of, like, so this is the system that I'm in, right? It was more of an understanding, I suppose, that okay, so this is the worldview that I'm in. This is the system that I'm in, and then in this system, these are the plays that I have. These are the different roads and junctions and structures that I have within this system that I'm gonna work in for now. And then within this system that I work in, and then there are a few things that I need to. Then that's when I think about them. Like, what about this? What about that? And then I'd sort of set up a system, but it was different from in this type of thing. I'm not actually thinking about the actual system since I've already built that catalog previously. So now it's about more of them are about intuition now than actually thinking through them. Whereas back then I was thinking through somewhat everything. Right now it's more I already know the systems and the catalogs and how I work within them. So even though okay, so 2023, 2024, I was learning about my energy management system, but then before then I was learning about my own how do I fit in within the different systems of how my personality works. So because I already knew how my personality works and the different systems that I have and how all of that play into my personality, given the different pseudo personalities that I've been through and all of that, given that I already knew that, now when the mental side took over, it was more of this is the best worldview. So it starts with the worldview of how things are. So this is the best worldview that I have, and then in that worldview, there are different structures that I have, and then just the best structure for this situation that I have, and then slowly, then I'd be thinking in the context of everything over, but everything outside, but in the internal present moment. In the internal present moment, it was just what do I need to get done now, but the thinking side then would be on the external factors, as saying cleaning this, cleaning that, and then making sure that everything works in order. So suppose this is now just something that I'm thinking about now in how it was different. But okay, so basically my mental side took over, and that's somewhat why. And I think another, okay, so the problem with, so the mental side took over, and then so, but then now I was thinking on the mental side on, I was thinking on the mental side on, suppose I do have 3 projects. So I was thinking on the so on the mental side, then I was thinking on whatever I'd be doing, I was thinking about some, I'd be thinking. And now this is different thinking from moving from different projects, because say if I'm thinking about this one, I'm somewhat resting from that. Thinking about this, I'm somewhat resting from that. But then now, because I had 3 projects, every time I think about school, it'd be something more in depth. Every time I'm thinking about say content, it'd be something in depth that I needed to do that was deep, and then how am I pushing that envelope forward and moving that envelope forward and so on. So that was then moving much deeper into, which uses a lot of more mental power that you need a break from, as opposed to just bouncing from place from bouncing from topic to topic to topic to topic, where I'm diving deep, but I don't need to force my mind to think about it. It's just natural for it to move in between those. But back to how things were. So that's when my mental side came in, and at this point it was just trying to get over line, doing whatever I can to get over the line. But in all of that, then recently I got somewhat my fire back, and what it felt like to, and that's how right now, I suppose, making this video as I am, I get what it means, or I get what it feels to somewhat be in tune with the universe again, or how to then, I'm still not there yet, but I know how to say how to tap into that. If I had the time and I could do it, if I wanted to do it, I could do it. That type of thing. So I got my fire back, and Am I Someone Worthy of Being Valued Part 2 is a video that I was working on, and that's somewhat what has, I think that's how I got the fire actually, was that I was working on that video, and then things started clicking. And okay, but an oath to living life was, I got tired of thinking. Basically, I'd grown up tired of being thinking and being philosophical and all of that. So that's when then I somewhat, it's somewhat a personal oath to just living life. And then if it ends up not being that way, then that's how it goes. But it's more, okay, we'll get to that part about the extra things, but it was after, so I'd taken the oath to somewhat live life before everything. So that was the first, so the first thing that happened was I took an oath somewhat. Let me just live my life and just see how things go and so on, which I suppose I had been building before, but now, given the shattering of the personality and everything, was much, it had to happen again. I had to rebuild. So I had to rebuild much, but there was some rebuilding to do, and then so that's when it came back, where I had to then take an oath to somewhat live my life. But then I've been focused on school for the past 2 weeks, really, and then here and there I'd been focused on videos. What videos can I do? What videos can I release? And then Am I Someone Worthy of Being Valued Part 2 was a video that I worked on, which I think I'm somewhat done with, but I still just need to record and all of that. So in the midst of that video, I found out I wasn't really okay with who I was as a person. Rather, the reason why the question came up to me of, am I someone worthy of being valued? The reason why that came up was because I didn't find myself. I wasn't okay with being myself, and that there was always something that I need to push or be, to strive for and all of that. And then in doing that, because I wasn't okay with myself and all of that, the question then pops up is, am I someone worthy of being valued? And in the midst of where I am right now, well, the continuing to, continuing to continuously improve without a self-regard is somewhat fatal in the position that I find myself in, given the time that I spent continuously improving without a regard for myself, right? So continuing to do that, I've somewhat gotten past that mountain as it is, personally. So now it's onto the next mountain. But if I continue then moving in this new mountain, I've already gotten past that. So now it's not that it has diminishing returns. It's more than it causes distraction because now you're repeating a something that you've already gone through. So there's no need to go through it. That's the first thing. And then by also continuing to do it, I'm exposing myself to then the fatal flaws that are inherent in continuously improving without self-regard, especially in the phase of life that I find myself in with the, I suppose, characteristics and things that I've learned and all of that. With where I find myself in, that doesn't, with the cards right now in front of me, that isn't really the best decision to make. And I should moving on to the next mountain. The next mountain isn't one where I should be focused on continuously improving without self-regard, and self-regard should be something. And then, given that I've crossed that mountain of improving and doing whatever I can, all of that, given that I've passed that mountain, I should at least acknowledge that I've actually gone through that mountain, and that there were some skills and characteristics. These are the skills and characteristics that I've learned through doing that, and that I've actually done that. And in that, I should cut myself some slack here and there because I've actually gone through this mountain thing that I've gone through. So there's that. And well, to finish off in the context of living life and planning life, well, I suppose, okay, so going back to, say, continuous improvement without self-regard, if you find yourself in that system, then I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad thing to continuously improve without, say, your self-regard, because when I was doing that, it was more because I was in a state of, well, I wanted to go somewhere, I wanted my personality to be this and that, and I worked towards that. So I wouldn't say that's wrong. If you're in that state, then go for it. For me, I'm at a phase where I'm out of that, and right now I should be looking on to the next thing. But if you're also in a phase where you feel that you should, maybe you feel that you should continuously improve, perhaps with some self-regard, or however the self-regard thing works for you, that's up to you. But if you feel you're in a, okay, maybe you're in a state where you have to continuously improve with little regard to yourself. That's, as long as you are somewhat able to live the next day with good health, with normal self-maintenance, then it's fine. But then if you're deciding then to put yourself under your own, say, mental stress because you wanna get somewhere, then that's up to you. But I wouldn't say that's particularly wrong. So it's just somewhat a way you wanna put yourself up, and for me, and that's then, say, what, somewhat planning your life. And well, I wouldn't say it's also wrong, because then I wouldn't have been where I am if I didn't go through all of that. Like the number of skills that I've learned, and not necessarily skills, the number of okay, it's my video, my language, and so on. So the number of evolutions that I've had to the many different skills that I originally, okay, so there was a new skill that, okay, so if you think about this, there's a new skill that I had. So say I got a new skill that I had. The skills that I had back then when I was younger, I don't have them anymore. They're just now evolutions of that skill, and not just evolutions, they've been integrated together. And chances are I still actually have many of the evolutions that I have right now are all based on all those many different skills that I learned from the start. So just learning one simple skill on how to analyze human behavior, how to read, what is a pattern, all of that has been evolved, combined together, all of that. So all of that has been evolved. So I don't have the same. I wouldn't say there's the same skill. There's just like one skill that I have that I still have right now. I'd say all of them evolved. All of them got better. Got a different thing now. Got integrated in my personality. So those are the things that I've learned. So even for a skill that is just maybe perhaps started as a logical skill, it now has integrated into one where it's based on my core self, or it's more based on the magic of life, where it's just going with the wind. You can't really put your hand to it or your finger to it and say this is that. It's just moving and is. But those were all started because I took a decision to, I suppose, get out of my shell, which I'll get into in other separate videos, but that's how things have built up and so on. And so that was, but in that context of living a planned life, that was because I wanted to achieve something. And then I wouldn't have been able to say, I wouldn't have been able to say, this is, I should let this part go, because I wouldn't have the experience to do so. I still then have the drive, the energy, the desire to do this thing. But because now I've already done that and the experience of that, I already know now that this isn't gonna get the result that I want to get. So I'm now moving on to a different, slightly better way of doing it. So that's another thing that comes with somewhat the planning, and then that's how then I've somewhat moved between the planning and then the freedom way of living life. And now it's just been planning, advance something, and then after that you get, okay, maybe just let things be, and then that's general cycle that I've lived in. And now I find myself in the oath way. I find myself in the place where I'm somewhat trying to live my life. And okay, I somewhat find myself in the place where I'm telling myself to just let things. Okay, right now not really. Okay, but so before that I took an oath to somewhat live life, but then I looked at what is it? Am I someone worthy of being valued? Part two, which is coming out soon. So I somewhat looked at that and how I didn't. I'm somewhat in a different phase of life right now for me personally, with the way it feels. So given that now, for me it's not really about the planning or living. Perhaps you are in one of those two. That's okay. It's now more of it's not more. Where I find myself is in right now. Given in this new phase, I still don't know which mountain I'm in. Though, to be fair, I'm probably gonna figure that out once I've leaving or cleared the mountain or conquered the mountain, whatever word comes to mind. But anyway, right now there is a slow integration happening between the two, where on one part I have the integration of being someone of the thinking part, and another part where it's just being in tune with the universe, being free, and all of that. And the times where, okay, so I think another one last thing to, let's see how many minutes we're on. 50. Okay, so one last thing to bring up, in that the planning actually happened in high school, where I was really in an environment that I would find myself enjoying in a sense. And even in suppose university, there weren't really environments that I actually ended up enjoying. But the times where I was being free or just letting things be were the the times where I'd say I'd find the best, or I'd bring the best out of myself. So in those were the situations where I find I bring the best out of myself. And then those are the situations where that should be what I should be optimizing for. And well, right now, in the stage of my life that I find myself in, it's better for me to. And right now, it's more about what do I create, what do I control, what environment do I put in, what environment do I create, what environment do I put myself in, what environment do I create, who do I bring in, who would I, and all of that. It's just most of what is required to me is my choice. So that's just it. So that's now, I think. But then one thing, given that I am a person who's prone to saying what if this, what if that, well, I've realized I do have a difficult personality to gel with, and then I do have other characteristics that float into that, which also make it difficult. And there are many things that keep me out of the ordinary, or don't make me normal per se. And well, even though, and well, it's not really about, and well, that may be then taken into an external context of then this is why I don't have friends, or this is why people don't gel with me, and so on. Really, okay, so if you go down that rabbit hole, then there are many. It's a dark abyss that we could easily pull out 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things from that on why you're different and all of that. It's an endless rabbit hole, perhaps per se. So there are those what ifs and all of that that do show up, but at the end of the day, it's then understanding that this is who I am, and then these are the skills that I have, this is what I'm building, this is the goals that I have, ambitions, this is the drive, and so on. It's then accepting that this is me, and however that happens, however, whatever happens from there happens, and the things outside of my control, I can't control, they're outside of my control, and whether I like it or not, they are going to, things will happen the way they will happen. So if they're outside of my control, they will happen whether I like it or not, the way they happen. And that's just it. So right now, the mode that I'd be going with is that I'd be in the living life mode, or rather, the integration mode instead of the living life mode, because it's like I feel I'm in a different mood, or in a different, because I'm in a different stage where this feels, the integration of the two feels like the best way to move, where it's the one that will allow me to achieve the best thing, or to achieve the best results and get the best out of myself with the current skills and abilities that I have right now. And that's the one I'll be going with. So with that, I suppose I'll see you in the next one.